My name is Blake Krone. I'm used to being on the other side of the delegate table at the Tech Field Day events, so it's interesting to be on this side of it, actually presenting and talking to everybody. Part of the things that we talked about when we were kind of rebranding from wireless to mobility was what are the other things that we are asked to do as wireless engineers. As wireless engineers, we've traditionally just been focusing on wireless networks, connections from a client to an access point, and AP to AP, bridge links, things like that. But some of the things that we are being asked to do now and focus on are these other devices, these other use cases for wireless. And one of them is location services. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to talk a little bit about beacons, a little bit about location services, and kind of give a little bit of a intro to it. I've talked about this in the past, where us as wireless engineers are transitioning to become mobility architects, where we need to focus on the broader picture and not just looking at it from one single use case, because we are being asked to be the experts, because this is a wireless-based technology. So why are we not the experts on this, right, Eddie? Why are you not an expert in beacons? It's a wireless technology. Doesn't it operate the same way as
I'm lazy
as wireless does? So to kind of kick things off in here is, what are the different types of location services that we have out there right now? There's really three kind of different high-level architectures around location services. There's the blue dot navigation, there's proximity alerts, and then there's just analytics from traffic flows. So we heard a lot about traffic flows yesterday when Cisco was talking to us about CMX and analytics, and the CMX in the cloud aspect of it is how do we collect information about the people that are in our stores, in our organizations, in our stadiums, using wireless technologies. So that's certainly one of the use cases, but really where we're seeing the bigger push for this is the blue dot navigations. Stadiums are not being built without taking this into consideration, is how do I provide a way for the attendees to find what's the nearest bathroom with the least amount of wait time. They want to know, if I walk left and go 30 feet to a bathroom, am I going to wait 15 minutes versus if I walk right and go, maybe 40 feet, is the bathroom line 5 minutes or 10 minutes? Andrew.
Quick question for your perspective. Do you differentiate between location services and proximity services, or do you think that's just semantics?
I think that location services and proximity services are completely two different things, and we'll kind of go over why that is as we dive down into the three different topics and talk about the technology that is used to provide those means. Because I think there's a lot of people that certainly do consider them the same.
And the reason I bring that up is because location services has always been one of those things that it's the next big thing. Like this year it's going to take off. And it was for like a decade and it never happened. And now we've transitioned to proximity services, and I think that's taken off way faster because it solves the underlying value proposition without having overbuilding a location service.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. So when we talk about these, pretty good segue in there. Thanks, Andrew, for that. So with the blue dot navigation, what do we need to be able to do this? There's either a BLE beacon, like these little guys here, or there's that high-density wireless network. And what was the problem with trying to do navigation on wireless? Andrew, you made the point very well.
Accuracy.
It was accuracy, and it was
precision.
The cost to implement that solution. Back when we were truly talking location services on wireless, we weren't talking density-based networks for capacity.
Yeah.
We were only talking density-based networks for location services.
Yeah.
So a lot of folks were like, you want me to buy how many additional access points that only do monitor mode?
Yeah, what do you mean I need additional APs around the exterior wall of my building? What are you talking about?
Right. So then BLE beacons kind of helped solve that, because now instead of asking somebody to buy a $1,500 list price access point, I might be asking you to buy a $30 beacon. So when we look at this transitional state of doing these navigation services, going from wireless to beacons, the cost was a huge play in this. And you're right, Andrew, is that this was why this was a much faster uptick in the take rate on this. Because there's a lot of people out there that do say is, is location services just as a whole, if you use that as the overarching terminology for all of these different ideas, is this a solution looking for a problem? You know,
Well,
do we even have the problem that we're trying to solve?
And you look back, and I think you know, you can't talk about any of this without mentioning RFID, right? The precursor to all this stuff is understanding from machinery or equipment or pallets or whatever it is, understanding the proximity side of it, but not the overlay to both of what you mentioned, Andrew, is contextual computing, contextual understanding of where people are and what they're doing and how they're doing it. So I think that there is a problem that needs to be solved on one side of it. You know, in manufacturing, there's definitely a side of understanding where you are and what's going on, but are we creating more work for ourselves? It's an interesting question you put.
Yeah, Sam?
Yeah, you know, we all are looking for use cases for selling the newest, latest, and greatest thing. And that use case can be anything from locationing, it can be speeds and feeds driven, it can be switch port upgrade driven, it can be monetization of your Wi-Fi network through captive portal.
We almost made it the entire week without
but the reality is that vendors are looking to justify selling more gear, and yeah, of course these use cases are applicable, but certainly not to everybody. I think that's the rub: is you take any particular justification for buying a new, the newest, latest, and greatest model of whatever it is, and if you're buying because of future proofing, it's sort of one side of that coin. If you're buying because you have an active engagement, you're actively trying to go pursue doing navigation or monetization of your Wi-Fi network, whether it's founded in good business sense or not, is a flip side of that coin.
Yep. So to go into the proximity side of things, to kind of create that separation, if you will, between proximity and what I think people consider location analytics. So if you say location analytics to somebody, they generally are asking for, are they in this department of a retail store, for example? Are you in men's? Are you in women's? Are you in shoes? Where are you at? With the proximity side of things, what I'm more looking at from a proximity side standpoint is, are you standing in front of a specific product engagement? Are you standing in front of a specific kiosk? Are you standing in front of a specific food vendor at a stadium? Are you in extreme proximity to somebody within like a meter, for example? Yeah.
I consider it like the difference between always on tracking versus when you're near something, I want to do something. Because location services, I think, I want to know where you're at the whole time and never lose track of you or a tag or something like that.
But you have to consider your end user, of course, right? Because end users don't differentiate between how maps works versus how weather works.
Right, and so you got to get down to what's my use case of, do I actually need to be tracking them every step of the way, or am I okay with once they hit a barrier or hit a exciter or hit a BLE beacon, that's when I can trigger something, and is that okay? Is that
right?
Part of that is you use the pronoun they. It could be it. Mm-hmm. And its are much more difficult to track than theys, because theys have a phone with them rather than the it. How do you're going to have some different kind of tag. So entirely different design and technology to find people versus things.
Yeah. So when we look at the proximity-based networks, could we do them, or the proximity alerts, excuse me, could we do them with a high-density wireless network? Did we ever have the time where we had a precise enough location to determine if somebody was standing in front of the end cap on aisle 14 versus aisle 15?
Ask Ekahau, our TLS.
But we never truly had that level separation of knowing where we were at.
Never has been in Wi-Fi.
So could we do it with high-density wireless networks? We could get close-ish. And Drew, you made very good points, is that then you start looking at things from AeroScout, looking at things from Ekahau, where you have a Wi-Fi tag that then had something else, such as ultrasound or some other device to know, yeah, I was in this precise location as opposed to this overall location.
Vicinity, yeah.
So proximity alerts, utilizing those for knowing exactly where they are. Are they in front of that end cap or not? What I think, Andrew, what you've been kind of hinting at a lot here is that from a traffic flow perspective, you just want to know where they are. You don't necessarily care, do I have 1 meter accuracy? You know, so many times when we start sitting down and talking to people about location services, what's the first thing they always ask? How accurate is the system? Can you get me 1 meter? Can you get me 2 meters?
I think that depends on the end user and the use case that they want to solve. Like, I came from a retail background, and they wanted like less sub 1 meter accuracy so they could tell what somebody was looking at on a shelf with their planogram, and you know, it's not possible.
Not with wireless. No.
I had a guy in healthcare that was sitting beside at a conference 2 years ago, and we were talking about the ability to know if a subject and if a patient was standing up or laying down in bed, because that's what was important to him. It wasn't just how close can I get to him, it was how close can I get, and are they standing up or are they laying
That's
down?
actually easier.
Well, now it is.
No, even 5-10 years ago, we had sensors that would be in a tag that would go. The tag could tell orientation. Sorry,
That's not
Blake.
You're not from Boise.
So, but I think that's the interesting use case about all of these is that, you know, Andrew, you coming from the retail environment where you have an understanding of the technology, you worked very closely with your teams to determine what do we truly need to accomplish this. Coming from the other side of it, where I was being asked to come in and talk with folks like yourselves and your teams, where I don't necessarily get involved on the day-to-day and understanding the business logic cases, everybody always come to us and say, we want location accuracy, we want it to be 1 meter accuracy, but what is that use case? That was a very specific use case example that you brought up of knowing what are they actually looking at on the shelf? Well, where are they looking? What are they seeing? And I think that was always the rub for us is how do we know where they are, and do they really need 1 meter accuracy? Sam?
Except how many customers are that you walk into and they say, you know what, I just want you to sell me a couple of tags so I can see what they do. and the logic is so completely backwards with the, I want to tackle it with a per tag price and I'll figure out a use case later once I can see what it does. The reality is that's simply the wrong way to go about it, but it's what everybody does.
Well, what's interesting is my use case is a little different. We just deployed a museum with this, and it takes advantage of both of them. But I think it was geared from not creating a problem so that I could sell this into a customer. It was how do you make things more interactive? And at the museum, it's not just blue dot understanding where they are and how to get directions to different exhibits or when something's happening, but it's also the contextual side for people with hearing impairments or vision impairments, where when they walk up to something, triggering an event, using that proximity so that they know what's happening at the time. And again, different use cases for different environments, but
right. And so that's what we're looking at from this shift in how we've been delivering location services. That shift from using wireless as the means to detect and locate where you are. There's still plenty of vendors that do that from an analytics standpoint, but from the actual engagement side of things, now we're shifting towards the Bluetooth Low Energy beacons because of the fact that I can engage in a more meaningful way with everybody in those environments.
We're replacing those sticks that you have to walk up, or QR codes were the precursor to this. I mean, everyone wanted to use a QR code. Everyone talked about QR codes like everyone used them, but no one used them.
Well, and if you take a step back, I mean,
does Keith have a QR code?
It's not my card.
I have one on my business card. I'm not saying that I didn't try, but it was one of those things that was a great idea with an absolute failed execution. And I think this is where the selling point with these comes in, specifically with engagement, is the problem with the QR code is you have to take out your phone, you have to download a QR code reader, you have to scan the code, you have to wait for the connectivity in order for you to get that content. With a beacon and an application and the framework already built in, you walk by and something happens. And that's the magic behind it.
But you take it a step back from the technology and you talk to like a retailer and they're going to say, well, I prefer outbound marketing because that gives me control over outreach to the customer. I don't want them coming to me. I want to reach out to them. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden you have this and it has dependency of they have to have the app installed. And so you're creating barriers to this engagement with the customer from a retail marketer's perspective, where they're like, well, that's kind of probably be lower on my list of desirables because that requires me to get them engaged and into the system before I can in some way.
And I think
perfect. So
that barrier of entry is dropping. you know, again, having to have the app installed versus downloading an app, installing an app, scanning a QR and all that, that's a little bit more cumbersome than you know, Target saying, hey, install Cartwheel and it'll work magically with everything because it's got the framework integrated into it, you know.
So how do we actually bring this into our environments as wireless engineers and as wireless people? What do we need to know about these beacons? How can we relate this to what we know as wireless engineers? So Bluetooth Low Energy beacons operate in the 2.4 gigahertz frequency, but don't immediately assume that because they operate in 2.4 gigahertz frequency that they are interference sources. A lot of the beacons operate in the upper channels of 2.4, way outside of wireless transmissions. So just because we have all these beacons doesn't mean they're bad.
Across the entire.
There are some of the beacons that operate in between 1, 6, and 11. And then there's other beacons from like Aruba, for example, that operate up in 37 through 39, up in the upper channels of it. So they're outside of where we're at. So if we have 100 of these, or if we have 200 of these deployed in a stadium, it's not as big of a deal. And that's kind of the thing that we've always said about Bluetooth, is that obviously you need to check your spectrum to see if they actually do interfere, but we don't have to be as concerned, possibly, with these tags, because they may or may not have problems in our compete for our RF.
I mean, the beacons were specifically designed. The iBeacon and the advertising spec part of it was specifically designed to not interfere with Wi-Fi.
Right.
So
it's supposed to play nice.
Channel 14.
Just imagine, you know, everybody is actually playing nice on the frequency because everybody has to share the medium, and we're not transmitting a lot of data with these. These are very small identifiers. So low power, short range on the beacons. Yes, we can have high power, long range on the beacons, but what purpose does that necessarily serve? Going back to the retail environment and tracking you, are you in a department or not in a department? If you have a singular beacon at a higher power with a larger range, you may only need that so that you can differentiate between menswear, womenswear, shoes, kids, kitchenware, houseware, whatever departments you want to base everything off of. So when we look at setting up these devices, we're doing configurable options on them. How do I make these things, you know, how do I make this be unique to me and different than the beacon that Jake has in his bag? And I don't know if Ryan brought any of his beacons with him on this trip, but how do we make this be mine? So we've got 3 configurable options, a UID, and then a major and a minor value. 3 items that we need to configure to say who this is. So the UID is a 128-bit value. And there's an example of them that you can see up on the screen there, just random character generation to come up with a UID. Think of that as your city or your zip code. This is where I live, kind of the general area. Then your major value is a 2-byte value. This is like the street name or the street number that you live on. So I'm getting me a little bit closer to who I am, but not exactly who I am yet. And then the minor is another 2-byte value, and that could be like your house number. So UID is going to be the same, typically, for your organization. The same
String is the same for your organization?
Yeah.
SSID.
The way I typically break it down is UUID major minor is organization, store, aisle. So it kind of, for retailers that you want
in
the
an aisle,
UUID.
you've got to, I mean, there might be different things in the aisle.
The end cap, the product.
Saying aisle is as the location within a store.
Yeah.
So your major is going to be identify your store or whatever the venue is. UUID is going to be organization-wide, simply because the app has to look for a UUID. And when the app is looking for a UUID, it's burning battery. So if you have to look for 10 UUIDs, you're burning 10 times as much just cycling through that.
Yep. So that UID is an SSID name for us. You know, what is that network name that we are looking for? The major and the minor then can become our BSSID of our actual access point that we're connecting onto. So we have to configure these, like Ryan said. depending on how your environment is set up, you could have your UID be the same globally for every single place, or you could have it unique per store. It depends on what you want to set up and how finite you're going to end up getting. These are all random values. You know, there's nothing to say that Eddie, you and I, doing a deployment, couldn't come up with the same exact random value for our UID and operate with our same random UIDs that we picked. And we're no longer unique. There's no registration of these. We don't have to register these anywhere. I can go through and I can change these. I can go through and I can reburn these onto the beacons as many times as I want if I have configurable beacons. And I can change everything, all these values, and set them to be whatever I want them to be. The major and the minor values, I can set them to be whatever I want them to be, other than 0. A lot of people don't like you setting them as 0. Estimos, for example, you can't set them as 0. It has to be 1 through 4096, if I remember correctly. So we have to set those values up to identify who we are. And that's how, if I put this on that end cap that says, you know what, this is at a Sony TV display. This is at an LG TV display. On 2 end caps right next to each other on the same aisle, or right next to each other in different aisles there, I can say, which one did they stand at longer and look at longer? Did they look at the Sony or did they look at the LG longer?
Isn't there a risk in delivering content based on something that you're allowing the end users to program the location of? For example, if you're delivering content through an app because you're, for, let's say, a museum, right? And it's content specific to the museum. And you just clearly said we can program all these values. What's to prevent me from going and grabbing the values from the museum and taking a beacon at home and programming it with those bits?
Yep.
And viewing that content.
So,
Ryan, is there a risk with that, Ryan?
There absolutely is a risk of that, and it's very easy to do. I've watched major sporting events in my house as if I was in the stadium.
So then so there needs to be a dividing line then between the security of the content you're looking to deliver and its generally acceptable pervasiveness, I guess, is what you would say.
And there's probably a difference between that versus a museum, because if you want to bring up the exhibit at your house, that's awesome.
But you're not pushing data from the beacons. You're just
saying I am here.
You're just saying I'm here. Yeah. So I mean, what's the danger there?
The danger is how you're authenticating users and delivering content that could be copyrighted, that has licensing agreements, that,
or worse, if you're using it for patient care and that
beacons inherently are not insecure. Programmers have found a way to make them insecure.
Yes.
By using them as the only authentication and verification.
What happened to security first IoT?
So one of the things.
No, it's true.
When was there ever security?
So
first
one of the
IoT?
things, to your point, I use Estimote for my projects. There is an option that you turn on. It's called Secure UID. If you're doing location-based stuff, not proximity, but if I'm doing location-based stuff, it can change the UUID periodically. It can change majors and minors and say, periodically, I'm going to rotate all of the keys.
And that's on the back end of the framework. The framework updates the app as
exactly.
Yep.
Even again, that's still security by obscurity.
It's a race condition.
Yeah, it's a race condition. What happens if I'm sitting in the venue and texting you the UUIDs that are being?
That's what I said. They're presenting it as a full-blown security option. The programmers have made it become an insecure system.
And I mean, there's things you can do.
So you have to do other techniques. Not only are they in our location, but they're connected to our Wi-Fi.
They're on our subnet. They're
that kind of
on a specific.
What if I'm in the venue, but I'm not on Wi-Fi? I'm on cellular. Right?
Then it says connect to Wi-Fi to Wi-Fi.
And I think that's part of the thing about is to Andrew's point earlier about the application driving usage of these things. How do you drive people to get your app if you have this embedded in your app so that you can utilize these things? One of the ways is drive usage by having it be, instead of a captive portal, download the app and have the app somehow do your back-end authentication to get you on the wireless, because then you launch the app, you're on the wireless. To Ryan's point, now you have a quote-unquote two-factor authentication because I have assured that you are connected to my wireless network before we go down the rabbit hole of saying somebody is honeypotting it.
Or it's almost like you need a seed value that is bundled in on the back end of the app.
So
network names
some
can be
ways,
spoofed, so can
some ways
VLANs.
that I've seen it is utilizing device GPS in addition.
Yeah.
Yes.
Geofencing.
So, well, not just geofencing, but verification. Just are they even in? Because if you're inside a building, if you're in the bottom of a museum or a stadium, your GPS is going to be, you're going to get cell tower triangulation. It's going to be massive. But are they even within 5 blocks of the building?
One of the things that we looked at doing with content, with video content, and it wasn't from a security perspective, although it could be used as a security from a security perspective, is in the app for the museum. Is if we're going to pull videos, if we're going to pull any multimedia, we pull it from a server with a local IP address on the local subnet. That nixes the problem right there, because if if he's at home and he's trying to access the video on that local server, it's not going to make any sense to him. It's something simple, pretty effective with what we were doing with it. We were doing it more, you guys can understand why. We're doing it so we deliver the content over the Wi-Fi network as opposed to an LTE network. But by the same token, it could be used for something like that. Any of the content has to be localized to a specific, something as simple as a subnet or a VLAN or something that you can only access.
That may not be the solution for everyone, but
yeah,
everyone's going to have to come up with a solution.
Yeah, I think
because I can walk around the mall and I can trigger Apple Store apps to launch and say, "Welcome to this store."
But so that's,
And-
Sam, you bring up a very good, interesting point about the security of beacons and the security risks of what we're doing. But I think it really comes down to is, what is the content that you are presenting? Is there a risk if somebody does this? In most scenarios, there's no risk to utilizing these if we're doing them from a retail engagement side of things. Because if somebody triggers a 10% off coupon, let's say by faking out a beacon that actually truly does exist, if they're triggering that to get themselves a 10% off of product, I made a purchase or I made a sale. So regardless, I have profit.
Sure. In the case of
in
retail.
that
Retail,
scenario,
what
coming in,
about
yes.
healthcare, right? I mean,
But I don't want to go down to all the different rabbit holes
talking about
in this regards. But I think the fact of the matter is that most of the use cases, the data that we are trying to relay to a consumer or how we are trying to engage doesn't have huge security concerns. If we're talking healthcare, yes, there's certainly HIPAA concerns. If we're talking in stadiums, yes, replay TV, getting access to those feeds that maybe are not accessible to you over your standard cable, or
it's just
blackouts.
like any security you have now.
Yep.
Is it imperative for your business? Is it required by regulation? And do you need to spend the money? Do you need that layer of security? Yep. Retailers, not so much. Starbucks isn't going to care if I launch their app and it thinks I'm in their store when I'm 100 miles away.
Yep.
A hospital will. A stadium will. You have to approach it differently.
know your environment.
Yeah, so I think, Sam, that also kind of leeways into the next slide here kind of well too, is that, what can be a beacon? When we look at wireless connected devices, we can't emulate those devices as easily as we can emulate a beacon. The beacon can be this physical object that I have right here. Beacon could be an access point. A beacon could be an iPhone or an Android phone running software that emulates as a beacon. So again, I think from the security standpoint is that we have a larger possible attack vector, which we've always known about in wireless. We've always known that the minute we go wireless, we increase our attack vector tremendously because we can attack wireless very easily. So when we talk about what can and can't be the beacon, now we've got all these items that can be beacons, the purpose-built ones, Gimbal, Estimote, Radiant Network. There's a bunch of different ones out there that have them in there. And then we have our access point manufacturers, Cisco, Aruba, Meraki, et cetera, who are putting beacons inside of the APs for the different use cases. Again, talking back to the use cases, is that would you use an access point with a beacon in it for blue dot navigation?
You're going to get about the same resolution as a Wi-Fi network.
Not necessarily, because are my APs placed where I need them to be to provide navigation? Would I use a beacon and an access point for a proximity alert to try to get you to buy that TV you've been staring at for 5 minutes? Not necessarily, because I don't know if you're standing in front of that TV.
That's when you use it for a welcome to the store
Exactly. So when we look at beacons that are inside of access points versus beacons on the walls, putting up one AP in a store works great for a welcome to our store, welcome to the Apple Store, welcome to, Chuck's restaurant. What do you want to eat? Here's a 5% discount code because I've noticed you've came in 10 times before. So I said this at the beginning.
Well, real quick on that, you said the purpose-built devices. One thing that should be mentioned is going back to security and features. A lot of these purpose-built devices have extra things they can do. So they don't operate in, you can run them in non-iBeacon mode, which could be perceived as a way to secure it. Because if it's not an iBeacon, you can't clone it.
Right.
And it actually does have two-way communication. But then again, you're drawing more battery from the device that's talking to it. And all these different versions have different features. What do you need? Do you want temperature monitoring? Do you want humidity? Do you want motion? Some of them have accelerometers. There's tons of different ways to approach it.
Yeah.
And you have to look at each solution to see if it does what you need.
Yeah.
It could be the difference between $1 per beacon and $50 per beacon.
Sounds like a good topic for Mobility Field Day 2 as a discussion there, Ryan. An advanced course to beacons, now that we have an intro to beacons. So I said this earlier on. Is this a solution for no problem? Is there a problem that we are trying to solve with beacons? I've heard this many times from folks out there. Is there an actual problem that we're trying to solve with beacons? Lee?
Well, I think it all depends, like anything else. It's a solution that you use to fulfill a business goal. And if you haven't defined that goal, they're just a plaything. If you look at the stadium we looked at, the 49ers stadium, they had an obvious use case and they had an app to go with it. And it was absolutely fascinating. They were able to put these building blocks into play and do all their mapping and all of that. That was really cool. I got a handful of beacons and I'm playing with them, and I got to the point where you showed us the makeup of the addressing and all of that. And it's like, yeah, I can walk down the hallway and I've got my little app that detects them, and it's like, okay, this is cool. I'm going yellow yellow to green. I'm close. Now what? It's like, okay, I learned what the building block is, but I have nothing to do with it. So I learned as much as I could. I put them aside. I've been approached by other people on our campus that say, we want to do stuff with beacons. Okay, what do you want to do? Not sure. Well,
but they sound cool.
Well, they are.
Yeah, I like,
the promise is profoundly cool, but again, it's just like, I want to get a firewall. Well, for what? I want to get a router. What are you going to do with it? You have to have a use case.
I think part of it is a lot of us take a look at the retail play, right? And that makes sense. We want to physically engage with somebody. We want to trigger that application. But that's not all. You can have an app on your phone that's being triggered by beacons that's doing stuff that you never see, right? So I'm walking around the store and it's not like, hey, do you want a coupon? It's sending a message saying, hey, Jake stood in front of this TV for 25 minutes.
Right.
And it doesn't come up and say, Jake, do you want a coupon? But maybe next week you get an email, a customized, sale.
Come back and buy this.
Say, hey, the TV you were interested in, we've got that on sale this week, and it may be a coupon just for you. Yeah. Or I may be tracking and analyzing the flow of people in my building and where they're spending time. But I'm not actually leveraging like an infrastructure system. I'm leveraging the app on their phone that they already have.
Right, and that's the thing, is that there are problems that we are trying to solve with this. Retail, we're trying to solve customer engagement. How do I make sure that my customers are engaged while they're in the stores without having it be the shark scenarios where we have, the used car salesmen that are constantly over there saying, hey, buy this TV, hey, buy this TV. Can I prod you without you even knowing that I'm prodding you to buy something? Can I do directions in large public venues? Can I go through and get you from point A to point B? Can I provide things inside a corporate environment?
Isn't it fair to say, too, that the beacons are just like the tiniest part of that? Then there's all the back-end stuff.
Yes, which I'm trying to get to, so that's why I'm actually going to cut. I'm going to cut everybody off if I can, please, so that we can continue on. So I can get to the code aspect of it. Is that this is the simple thing.
Yeah.
How do I actually bring this into what I am building? Because that's what we are being asked to do. We're being asked to say, okay, I want to do beacons. It's wireless. I know I can go to Ryan and say, Ryan, give me a solution, and you'll give me a solution because I know that you can code it. Whereas if I go and say, not to pick on you, Sam, but if I say,
please.
Sam, I want to have a retail environment that's about engagements, and I want to use this beacon, build me the solution.
He'll build it. He'll
call you.
So
he'll sell it.
when we're looking at how we do this, if I can pull up a couple examples here real quick, is that let's start at very basic, extreme basics from the Meraki interface, for example, from Cisco. If I want to enable beacons, I'm going to get to that point, Ryan. If I want to enable beacons, all I have to do is just go in here onto the radio and say, I want to do advertising enabled if I have an MR32 or if I have a MR72 or a 42 that supports this, and I can create my UID, my major, and my minor. Here's one drawback with this type of scenario, though. I'm going to generate a new UID, Ryan, if you're going to try to steal my UID there. One problem with this is that all of them have the same UID for a store. So if I have 4 APs in a store, they all have the same UID identifier, they all have the same major identifier, and they all have the same minor identifier. So I can't use these to separate based off of departments.
So in this scenario, in this solution that they're offering only does that. You're saying it doesn't have.
It's one identifier for
a location.
Global
for a network.
Yeah.
Okay. And,
for the network.
And we're talking about APs. We're not talking about individual.
No, we're talking about this is that beacon that's inside of that access point.
The only issue that I've seen with that, so like we said earlier, this is great for single location, quick shop restaurant or quick service restaurants, stuff like that, where you walk in, it just says hello, welcome. You're not trying to get location within the store. The issue that I've seen is if you have 4 access points, all beaconing the same.
It'll
the app
multiple
sees
times.
4 with different ranges. It doesn't know what's going on.
Yep. So then, how do we solve that problem? Is by switching to these little devices. But now, if I go in and say, "Hey Eddie,"
hey Eddie,
hey Eddie,
I want you to configure 100 of these. Do you want to go around and configure 100 of these devices? Now, this is great from being able to configure it online. So that's where we get into, for example, with these estimates, where I can go in here and I can go into the estimate cloud service and I can change the settings from the cloud for these beacons. That then, when the app is launched and I just walk around, it updates all the beacons, so I can get those updated.
And with that, even further, you can incorporate that function into your app, so that as your customers walk around, it's updating your beacons, getting readings, getting stuff that doesn't matter to them, and sending it back to you or reconfiguring the beacon itself.
Okay.
Are you going to touch on the Aruba ones?
Possibly. So as we get into, we talk about configuring that proximity UID, I can just click into here and I can generate a new one. These ones are set up as the default ones because I took them out of the box last night to get them set up. So they have the default UID that was created so that the app on the phone knows what to use. From a security standpoint, I'm a little concerned at that, so I could go in through and I could say, generate a new UID. I'm not going to, because the code I have that we're working on next has these already burnt in, but I can go through here, I can say, I want to generate a new UID so that I can then be, quote unquote, a little more secure, because I don't have the same one as Ryan ordering a dev kit from Estimote or Jake or somebody and getting all these the same way. So then my major minor, so I guess, 65,535 is the max that Estimote was. I was a little off in that 4096 statement, but you have to start at least at 1. So I have these set up. Now if we look at one of the other ones, so this was the ICE one, which is this one. Not my names, these are just the default names again. So then looking at Mint, the only difference now is that we've got the minor set to 2 on this. So this could say, Eddie, here's some swanky shoes to go with your outfit, and here's a new shirt. I could have these be different if I wanted to do product-based coupons for them, for example.
Before we get too far away on it, just and what I was getting at with that is from the Aruba perspective and also Zebra Impact. If you use the Zebra product, those are the two big ones that you can make all of these changes and update from the cloud and push them down as long as you're using a root beacon inside one of the APs. So if you have an AP with a USB beacon into it, it will actually go through and update the beacons via the Bluetooth network from beacon to beacon from the cloud so that you don't have to embed it into the app and you don't have to make those changes. It's just one of those differentiators with those guys.
So now, obviously, you're looking at, okay, so I understand how I can configure this device to be who I want it to be. It's just like setting up a wireless network. I know what parameters I need to configure. I can change those. But how do I actually use this? Again, to pick on Sam. Sam's not a developer. Sam didn't go to school to learn code. He may not want to spend a lot of time learning code, but you're like, you know what? I need to get this proof of concept app out there at least real quick to show him what to do. So one of the things that you can do in here, and a lot of the different ones, Aruba offers this, Cisco, Meraki offers this as well. They actually posted some source code now. I can go through here and I can create a new app. So I created one last night, but let's just say I want to do proximity. So this is going to use for determining which one you're close to. Like I say, I want to use this. What language do I want to code in? Objective-C, Swift, Java, if I'm doing Android. So yeah, yes, Ryan, we're going to say Swift, which is what I did choose already, but it gives it a name. I can select my beacons that I want it associated to, and it's going to create that template, and it's going to kick it off for a download. I'm not going to do that again right now because I already did that. So you can see here, this is what I created last night. It gives me an app ID and an app token. When I download that code, then what it does is it gives me the bundle that I can load into Xcode that has all of this started at least. It has all of the bits and pieces in here, like we were talking about, burning in that UID into your code. There's those UID values, that major, that minor value for what they're going to do. And in this simple version of it, all it's saying is that it's just looking to see, are you in near of one of these beacons? I don't care which one you're in near, but are you going to be near one of these? So I could, if I already had maybe I'm working with somebody that already has a loyalty app. So how do we engage these folks? We ask them, do you already have a loyalty app? So big box retailers, a lot of them already have a shopping app of some sorts that they load on their phone. A lot of people will load to try to do price checking. Can I just provide this code snippet then to that developer that says, here's what you need to do to engage in this system. Here's the framework for it.
So can I once I have the code, I can just drop in anybody's beacon ID if I've got beacons from somebody else, and the code compiles and works just the same as it should, as it does otherwise.
I just need to know what these values are. The secure UID aspect of it provides for a mechanism of being able to have your app talk to, for in this example, the Estimote Cloud, to know what is the updated UIDs.
And this will show my complete ignorance on this whole topic. Is the iBeacon is that the standard, or are there multiple standards?
There are multiple standards. There's iBeacon from Apple, and then there's Google's Eddystone. There's,
Eddie
Stone?
Thank you, Drew, because I actually was thinking.
Hey, man.
So there's, like anything out there, obviously there's competing versions of what we want to do. There's competing ways. There's benefits. There's values. There's, people have seen security from one standpoint to the other thing. So yeah, you need to be set up to talk in such a way. You have to know what you're doing on this. So I've got all this code in here, and all I need to do is just compile it. I don't actually have to change anything. I can just run the compile from here, and because I have a developer account, so that's one of the rubs about this though too, is that in order for you to actually load code onto an iOS device, you have to have a developer account. So I've got my developer account. I've compiled this on here, and let's see if this actually
is the developer account's free. Excuse my ignorance, but do you have to pay anything?
I think it's $99.
$99.
Yeah,
per year.
Yeah, it's
for
minimum.
the Apple developer.
Per year?
Per year.
Per year.
There are also developer accounts from the manufacturers of beacons, And because they provide not just a developer account, they give you a back-end framework to manage the beacons. Some of them will have your, up to 5 beacons is free. Some of them will be completely free. Some of them will charge money right out of the gate. It all depends on what features you're looking for and who you're going to use.
Yeah. So as you can see here, so this is the Estimote app that's just showing it from a management perspective of what I'm seeing, and what the what the configurations items are on there. Obviously, with everything in real.
Is that the app that you created, or is that
no?
like a default
So that's
app?
what I'm going to. Thanks for the segue in here. But I was queuing this up as a Microsoft demo that it may or may not work.
I want to see you play Sonic.
One of the things with beacons is that obviously they're in range. Ryan,
Open your mouth.
catch another one, please.
Don't bounce off the
You
TV.
only gave me one.
So, they're all in, at least one's still in range here. But another app, let's see if I can make this one work too, is that this is one that I also did. So because I'm near this one, it's triggering saying that 25% off access points. Ryan, switch. See if we can get it to trigger.
I'm gonna need you guys to juggle these things.
Yeah, and of course in
Light them on fire.
Yeah.
perfect examples of demos, it's not going to trigger. But another one would trigger to say that there's demo sales off of MRs, MXs or MSs, based off of the different UIDs, so this is just, are they in range? But let's show one quick other code here real quick, which was the shopping app here.
What is the range? Can you adjust that?
You can, you certainly can.
Great question.
So as an example of how do I do that engagement, so again, I match based on my UID, then I match based on, typo there, good thing I didn't push that to the device. I match based on the major ID, then now down here I can match on that minor value, which if it's 1, it's an MR access point sale, 3, a switch, to an MX security appliance, for example. So this is how I can put inside of that code the parameters I want to do from a customer engagement standpoint. So at least for a proof of concepts, you don't necessarily need to be a full-blown developer. Because that's one of the things that I've always said through doing any of the RTLS demos that I've done through AeroScout, Ekahau, whatever the case may be, using any of the APIs that vendors give us, I don't need to be a developer to do this. I can download these SDKs, I can load and compile at least the examples to hopefully get them engaged and get them to see what they can do on it. And then if you need to continue on, then obviously reach out. I would strongly encourage everybody to reach out to an actual development house to have a product that is developed and then supported and everything from bugs and maintenance standpoint.
So, Eddie, you asked the question. It's like, what's the range? So typically you can control, it depends on your beacon, you can control the power level of a specific beacon. So you can set a dB threshold of how loud you're going to transmit, like showing it up there. The other piece is that in your app, typically there's 3 levels of sensitivity to the beacon. So there's far. Basically, I can see and demodulate the broadcast. There's near, which is, there's a definition of how much RSSI you see. And then there's immediate, which means I am right on top of it's like with less than a meter of the beacon. So.
Which is this one, but I'm not sure. Ryan, toss me that other beacon, please, sir. I think it was this one. We'll see if it works. This is an example of the near far, where they're at. It doesn't look like it's going to update. Again, perfect demos, awesome. But the point is that this would show, and it would, are you close? Are you near? Are you not far? And then eventually, does the tag get to the house?
So depending on the density of what type of deployment you're going to do, you would choose whether the levels are going to be more or less.
Right. If I'm going to use these, so to kind of bring in what.
If you want to do location,
if I can type
it a lot.
If I wanted to do something, and let's pull up my Meridian here to kind of show that example. If I want to do navigation with this, I might have these be higher power because I don't need as many of them. Right. If I want to do the end cap placement, then I'm going to have them be low power. And apparently I'm not going to be able to bring that up. There we go. So if we look at the beacons that I have in my house, some of them are going to be higher power for these ones that are the location services. Mm-hmm. If I go down to my basement, oh, not that one, sorry. I should have just stayed where I was. Here it is. So this one is a proximity beacon to trigger, to Jake's point, these don't have to do engagements. I have one that's set to my desk so that when I'm in close proximity to my desk, it can trigger things, turn lights on, set status messages. I love some of the things that Ryan does with these things where he ties in all these different APIs to say if he's on phone calls, if he's at his desk, set the temperature of your room, turn the AC on. There's a lot of things that you can do with these from an engagement side of things that, like Jake said, people don't ever need to know about. But you have to have low power for that. The problem with this one is that even at a power level 7 of this, it triggers all the way up in our bedroom 2 floors up from that one. So I need to still tune that power down and get it more precise yet.
I think the key is that they're triggers, right? These things, in talking to my customers and how I position this with them, it's all about being a trigger. And what the event that takes place after that is, it's figuring out the sensitivity of the trigger, where you want that trigger to go off. But then there's a slew of conversations you can have on the back end. And it's just like anything else. If you're on IFTTT on your phone or any GPS device where you want something to start with an action, this is a good way of creating that trigger.
It's a digital representation of a physical location.
It's exactly what it is.
One of the ways that, Blake said earlier, I've had people come to me before and say, we want to use beacons. And the question is, for what?
For what, yeah.
And they don't know.
Yeah. Because they're awesome.
the way I describe it to them is, it's a buoy in a harbor. Mm-hmm. Without a map and without references to other buoys or what you're around, it's completely meaningless.
Exactly right.
You see a buoy sitting in the middle of a field, it doesn't mean anything. It's when you give it context and you give it a map that it becomes meaningful.
And I think you can dive down really, really deeply into what happens with that. An example is there's a company here that's working with Target, and one of the things that they did, pick on Target again, what they did with it is you're contextual because it knows you're standing in front of a KitchenAid mixer, and they know that that's where you are. So when you launch a search query on Amazon to find out how much the KitchenAid mixer is on Amazon, and it returns a price of $169 versus $199 on the shelf, they're data mining that, and by the time you get down to the end of the aisle, there's a display offering you a $30 off coupon if you go back and pick up that mixer. And that's all, a combination of multiple technologies being used, but it all starts with the fact that there is that trigger, that action of knowing exactly where you are so that you can make decisions based upon that information.
So we're right before lunch, but Lee wanted to make a quick comment.
Yeah, I'll be very quick. There's a lot of room for analogy here, but they almost strike me as if you've ever done any work with alarm systems. They're like a door contact. They're a motion sensor. They're any one of those things that the word trigger, they trigger something, but what are you triggering? What is the panel? And the panel can be whatever you want it to be, but they don't do a hell of a lot unto themselves, for what it's worth.
So I think to kind of wrap things all back up here and kind of close it out here before lunch, the thing is that yes, these are wireless. Do we need to understand them 100% fully and go all the way down into being a programmer? Not necessarily. Is it beneficial for you to at least understand how you could possibly do something with these? These are all SDKs that I just simply quick and easily downloaded, loaded in the developer tool, and I could just run and compile them and use that to show the benefits of beacons. And I could just change inside of here just a little bit of what I wanted to do. So you don't need to be a developer to understand these things and be able to build with them. The key is to, search for the information, search for an SDK based off of what beacon you're going to use, and get that example code and look at that. Don't try to start from scratch and paint from a blank canvas. So.